Well, it's the day after we learned that there is no more dynasty. How are y'all feeling out there?
You are Locked On Bama, your daily podcast on the Alabama Crimson Tide, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back into Locked On Bama, AHSA's radio network. Luke Robinson, that's me. Bama Online's Jimmy Stein, that's him. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We'll talk about FanDuel in just a bit. Want to thank you, everydayers. Want to thank you, newbies. Want to thank all y'all for joining us today. Certainly appreciate y'all in these very troubling times, Jimmy. And, I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know why. A lot of things come back to shows and movies that I've watched in my youth. And for today, I was thinking, boy, I feel like Danny Noonan on the green at night when Maggie, the girl, the waitress that he was, with, he said, "Oh, Maggie, I'm in big trouble." And that's how I feel right now. I feel like Danny Noonan saying, "I'm in big trouble." And I'm saying I'm in big trouble, meaning, and I'm using I collectively as in Alabama. And I'm going to tell you, Jimmy, I don't feel any better. It's been a hard day. I'm going to tell you the truth. This has not been an easy one to get over. And I've seen a lot of Alabama fans today. I've interacted with some online who think that, you and I were over the top, and then some of us think we were right on. And that's what this podcast is all about, is to express opinion. But I saw some Alabama fans today at my daughter's basketball game. And I'm going to say, on the whole, I must have talked to 6 or 7 different people I know. And all they could look at me and say is, what was that? And I was like, man, I don't know. You and I were talking off air beforehand about how we don't even know what to compare this to.
Yeah, it's a unique loss, because that wasn't the worst team Alabama's lost to by far. I've been asked that, is that the worst team Alabama's lost to? I'm like, no, not even close. In my opinion, that team is not as, Vanderbilt is probably not as good as Oklahoma when you factor in the dudes and dudage. I mean, now Vanderbilt played extremely well all year and they got the playmaking quarterback, but Oklahoma is full of 4-star and even 5-star talents. I mean, they have dudes. They've just struggled due to injuries at wide receiver and offensive line, which they still have. But that's not the worst team Alabama's ever lost to. I'm old, so I've seen Alabama lose to Memphis in '87. I've seen Alabama lose to Northern Illinois and Central Florida back when they were in the Big 12. We lost to Louisiana Tech twice in a row. One time we had a losing streak against La Tech. So I've seen Alabama lose to worse teams, but those were average Alabama teams. That's one of the worst losses, if not the worst loss, because this was a good Alabama team with a lot on the line, and they lost to a 5-5 football team. In fact, got smoked by a 5-5 football team with all that was on the line. That's why, to me, it may have been the worst loss I've ever been associated with Alabama. I think it was. Now, that said, we'll talk about it during the show, but I feel slightly differently than Luke after I've digested it for 24 hours, rewatched the first half. I feel a little better about last night, because I think if you just change a couple of changeable things, people have to remember football. Here's what kills football for a lot of football fans is sample size and recency bias. It's the two things that will get people way off track, especially recency bias. People have to remember this same exact team of players beat Georgia. They beat LSU in Baton Rouge freaking 8 days ago or so, or 14 days ago. They killed it. They shut out Missouri. They beat Wisconsin and Madison 42-10. It's still that same team. But for whatever reason, people feel like the last 5 minutes that I saw them play, that's what they are. And that's not how college football is. It's an up and down thing. You can be good one week and bad the next, then fix it, then get worse. No one knows what's going to happen. But I'm just saying that's not indicative of what's happened over 11 football games. That was by far their worst performance, but that's not who this team is.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I will also say I think this is part of who this team is, the bipolarness. is,
Sure.
the you and I say this all the time, and I guess it can stand true now that you play your best once or twice a year, your worst once or twice a year, and in between is what you are. Obviously, that was our
the
worst.
That was
But
the
our
worst.
worst was so bad it set a new floor.
There is a new floor. That's true. A new floor was set. That was worse. I think Vanderbilt's worse than Oklahoma, but the performance against Oklahoma was worse than the performance against Vanderbilt. Because at least against Vanderbilt, they scored 35 points. Got to remember, Vanderbilt was a one-play game. That was a one-play game. If they hadn't converted on the 4th and 1 when they surprised threw the ball on 4th and 1 and kind of beat Malachi and they scored a touchdown on 4th and 1, if they'd handed the ball off and Alabama stuffed them, which they had earlier in the game, if they just handed the ball off and Alabama stuffed them, Alabama wins that game. But they didn't. They did the surprise play and they scored. I'm just saying that play was that game was decided by one play, and Alabama scored 35 points. So they should have won the game. The Oklahoma game, Alabama was non-competitive from very early on. They had problems in the game from very early on that were never fixed. Oklahoma drove it within the in Alabama's red zone 3 straight possessions. Somehow Alabama held them to only 3 points in those 3 possessions, but that was indicative of the problem Alabama faced defensively, and then offensively never answered all night, except for the 2 times that they scored touchdowns that got called back, one on a good call by 1 inch and another on probably the worst call I've ever seen. I mean, other people.
Yeah, there have been some folks trying to explain that it was illegal touching because this, that, and other. I don't know. When the head of officials who does the replay for the broadcast, like, yeah, I don't think that's a good call. I mean, and again, maybe we're wrong, but when the announcers say that and the head of official who's in charge of reviewing stuff says, yeah, that's a horrible call. I mean, that's all we have to go by.
Yeah, had Alabama's call on at the same time. Tyler Watts watching the game, who's a football expert to say the least. Tyler Watts immediately said it was a bad call after he saw the replay.
Well, and let's again, that is, we're not saying that Alabama wins the game with that. You don't know what would have happened, but
no, I'm not saying that.
What did happen was frankly embarrassing. It was such a humiliating loss that it's one of those, I have some Auburn friends, and I always kind of laugh because when Auburn loses, it's always the same story. Well, I need to start paying more attention to my family and my job and my religion more anyway. I don't even really like football. And then when they win, it's like all is well. And I've always thought, I don't look at myself that way. This loss made me feel that way. There have been other losses this year. Now, Vandy, I was mad at the time, and I called it the worst loss in Alabama history because of what was on the line. No, this supersedes that by a long shot. Now, and I'm not trying to be a prisoner of the moment again, but I believe that. And then the Tennessee loss, yeah, I mean,
that's a playoff team on the road.
And life on the road in the SEC is tough. And all 3 of these games were on the road. Vandy ain't really a road game. Oklahoma's having the worst year they've had in decades. And that's the one where we take a beating?
The Nick Saban era, people have to remember about the 3 losses. In the Nick Saban era, the usual outcome of a season was not 12-0. The usual outcome was 11-1. And that loss was usually to a highly ranked team, sometimes at home, often on the road. I would say the Tennessee loss was almost typical of the Saban dynasty. That was a loss that could have happened in any of the Saban years where you lose to a playoff team on the road. The other 2 losses are, and gosh, I hate using this term. I hate it because I'm playing into a narrative that I don't like, but I'm going to call them DeBoer losses. This is new to us. This is new. This is something we haven't seen in 17 years. Now, why did these games play out this way? Why did this? I don't know. I mean, I wish I could sit here and tell you, what an oyster tastes like. There are things I can't explain and things I can't do. But Kalen DeBoer lost games that Alabama has not experienced losing in 17 years. And he's got to fix it. I'm sure he's no dummy. He knows we can't keep doing stuff like that, or I'm not going to be the coach here very long.
No, but I love your analogy. I wish I could tell you what an oyster tastes like. You remember the old Saturday Night Live skit where Kurt, whatever his name was Mango, that little like monkey man, and he was like, how can you love mango? How can you touch a rainbow such as mango? How can you tell me what an oyster tastes like, such as Jimmy Stein?
But anyway, after we come back from what's going to be a compelling live read, I'll talk about that. After watching the first half, I haven't watched the second half. I'm going to do that tomorrow. After watching the first half, I feel somewhat better about.
I was going to tell you earlier when you said I've watched the first half and I feel better. I was like, Jimmy, don't watch the second half. No,
unfortunately, I must. But we played better in spots, and I do think that last night I was too over the top for me, especially in terms of the blanket. That was a 60-minute disaster. There was some good, some snaps were executed well. Some kids played hard throughout. There were just too many errors. Too many errors, particularly at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball.
It's okay. I know. And you're it's good cop, bad cop usually on here. You're usually good cop. I'm usually bad cop. Or I'm media. I'm just a regular. I'm like, the cop at the desk.
It's not that. I think we just have a different.
But you're okay. You had Jimmy. It's the most unusual loss I think I've ever been a part of, and I'm talking about kick six. The kick six thing was wild, but it's like it's uber memorable, and it'll go down in college football history.
That Auburn team played for the national championship. They were good. They were really good.
The big time, the beatdown in San Francisco to Clemson was bad, but we kind of got it because you could see the wheels beginning to get a little shaky towards the end, even though we were undefeated. And now we know Trevor Lawrence was a generational dude.
Yeah, I think we were just going to do for something to go wrong.
We didn't show up.
That's the concerning part. That's true. And I agree, we didn't. I agree. I called it, again, a cultural loss. I mean, there's X's and O's and there's plays we didn't. Last night, my concern was for the culture, because there should have been a better performance than that. There should have been
from somebody.
Too much was on the line. But what I don't like, and this is again from watching the tape, it's this guy's fault. It's Jalen's fault. It's this guy. It's Pritchett up front. No, really, what it is from rewatching is it's all of those things. It's all of those things. And yes, Jalen played poorly, but he didn't get help. His wide receivers dropped balls that were well thrown. His offensive line didn't get everybody blocked. Not the backs didn't always pick up who they were supposed to. And when they did those things well, sometimes Jalen didn't. That's so right. It just never worked, but it's never one guy's fault. If it's one guy's fault, whose fault is it? Kalen DeBoer's. And that doesn't mean we need to make a change or he needs to be in the hot seat. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying Kalen DeBoer's got to do a better job than that. He'll be the first to tell you that he needs to.
We'll tell you more about this grand tapestry of suckiness when we return. Things I never thought I'd say. Okay, I'm going to tell everybody about FanDuel right now. The NFL was hot and heavy today. It was a lot of fun. Get ready to tackle more NFL action with your number one sports book in America, and that's FanDuel. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get 150 smacks and bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. I hope you heard that. I whispered it. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now I want to tell you about Academy. Jimmy and I love Academy. And you need to go see Academy in Birmingham, 4610 US Highway 280. Don't worry about the address because you know where it is. It's the old Best Buy in the Target Shopping Center. I'm going to call it the Academy Shopping Center now because that's the big deal over there. Go over there. It's over there, Carrabba's, all that. Can't miss it. The Chick-fil-A on 280. Everybody knows where it is. And at Academy, they got everything you need for hunting, fishing, camping, sporting, baseball, and everything.
Yetis.
Golf,
They have Yetis. They have Yeti products. I'm a Yeti product
products,
fan.
Shimono, Nike. They got everything. They got it all. And you want to go get it because they got all kind of curbside pickup and they want to help you. The nicest people I've ever been around. I'm telling you, I don't know where they got them. They must have brought them in from Canada. Never seen anything like it. It's like they've all been working at a Canadian Chick-fil-A. Everybody's like, how are you doing? You okay? Can I get you anything? You want some more free stuff? And I mean, they were just super nice. So go check out Academy right there on US Highway 280, behind the Chick-fil-A on 280. Everybody knows where that is. So go over there and check them out. You'll love it. All right. So, I mean, we agree that this was as bad as it gets. And I guess now, Jimmy, and I appreciate people like Tyler Booker. I appreciate Tyler Booker coming out today and saying things like, look, as long as I'm playing here, I'm going to lay it on the line. Because, I mean, I think the first thing people start screaming is, well, this team is quit or they're going to quit. And I hope they don't quit. And, I mean,
I don't think that's going to happen.
Technically, there is a shot at the playoffs. I'm not going to even broach that subject. So don't worry. If you're like, don't talk to me about playoffs, I'm not. I'm just telling you, technically, there is a shot. I kind of would feel guilty if Alabama got in at this point.
I'm not.
I know you wouldn't. And I know, but I mean, there is part of me that's like, you know, I was so worried about all this expansion with undeserving teams getting in. And then if my team's the first undeserving team to get in, I'll be like,
it's kind of funny because all year long I talked about a 3-loss team is going to get in this playoff. And if I'm wrong, the 3-loss team is going to miss by like one spot of getting in. And I had no idea at the time that I was making that prediction that I'd be talking about Alabama. Because if I had to predict right now, like it's too early in the week for predictions, but just to throw this out there, here's my prediction as to what's going to happen. I do believe Alabama's going to get off the mat and beat Auburn. And I do believe there could be some wacky circumstances this upcoming weekend. But I believe Alabama's going to finish 9-3. And when the final college football playoff rankings come out, Alabama will finish 12th, which will actually put them, you would think, oh, that's in. But actually, it's probably going to put them one spot out because you get leapfrogged by a Big 12 champion who's actually going to be ranked behind Alabama, but get in over Alabama. So in other words, I believe Alabama with that third loss now will miss the college football playoff by one spot. That's my prediction.
I'm going to tell you right now, Jimmy, and my
but it's not tragic, by the way. I'm not complaining.
No, it's not tragic. It's not tragic.
Alabama didn't earn their way in and got screwed. It's not like they earned their way in and got screwed.
No. And it's not tragic necessarily that they miss it. I mean, at the beginning of the year, we're like, yeah, 9-3 is a possibility. You and I both picked them to make the playoffs. 9-3 is a possibility. It's not the end of the world. But I think now that we've gone through the season, it's one thing to say it at the beginning of the season, like, well, would you want to fire him at 9-3? Of course not. I don't want to fire him now anyway. Don't get me wrong. But what I'm saying is the way we lost these 3 games, knowing the games we did win, it makes it a bitter pill to swallow.
There might have been people before the season that said, you know, I'm looking at this team in the transition and I'm going to predict 9-3. None of those people were saying it's 9-3 with a loss to Vanderbilt. They were thinking, okay, 9-3 because you lost to Georgia, you lost at Tennessee, you probably lost at LSU, and that's all kind of semi-understandable. That's what people were saying in July and August, you know. But then you saw how the season played out, and you beat Georgia, and you show at times that you really are one of the best teams in the country. Ends up Alabama's just literally that Jekyll and Hyde team where, hey, when they're good, they're really good. When they're bad, they're terribly bad. Those up and downs weren't really present during the Saban era because Saban had them at this almost monotone. That's where Joyless Murder Ball came from. It was this monotone, major effort, but very business-like. This team is very youthful in its exuberance. They're like a child where it has great moments of, wow, my kid can name all the presidents in a row. And then the next day, you know, your kid takes the goldfish out for a walk and it dies on the sidewalk. And you're like, how can my kid be this dumb? He thinks he can take the goldfish for a walk. How's this possible? Yesterday, he can name all the presidents. That's what this football team is like. They're both of those things. And last night they took the goldfish for a walk.
I will say this. My son, when he was very young, he did take the goldfish out because he thought it was having trouble breathing and sort of pushed on it.
He was right.
he was right. He was having trouble breathing, but after
the fact, he was more of a prophet than a doctor.
Yeah.
He foresaw trouble with the fish
and
breathing.
he was young. He was 14. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. He was very young. But yeah, and again, let's also be very real about this. Alabama fans are taking this even harder. There'll be some people that won't admit it, and that's fine. But Alabama's taking this even harder, given the fact that Auburn wins a quadruple overtime against Texas A&M, and now they have all this momentum. And Goodman from AL.com has come out with an article saying DeBoer is a failure and a freeze warning is coming. And Alabama fans are taking it worse because of that. There's no doubt. I'll understand it. I feel your pain.
Why did anybody read that?
Well, look,
I saw the headline, but I haven't read it.
I mean, it's so funny. Anyway, I'm not going to go there, but I'm just saying that if we're being real with ourselves, when we see our hated rivals, all this exuberance and all this fun and all this hope, and then we look over here and we're at the bottom of the barrel. This is the bottom of the barrel.
They had their best moment the same time Alabama had their worst. So those moments collided, right? I mean, their best night is Alabama's worst. And I guess that affects some Alabama fans that way. But I think that next week it's a new weekend, and literally anything can happen. I don't rule out Auburn winning that game because why? Because Auburn's got a handful of really good football players. They're on an uptick. Alabama's got to answer. Alabama may have a cultural issue that they have to answer, but I also believe this. I said earlier in the show, I thought Alabama would win. It's because if you look over the course of 11 games, every performance all season long, on the average, Alabama's been better than Auburn. I also believe from my watch of the two teams that Alabama's got more good players than Auburn. I do think Auburn's better than their record. I think Auburn's more capable than their record says they are. But I believe Alabama's got more good players than Auburn. I think even some Auburn people would agree with that general principle that Alabama's probably a little more talented than Auburn is. But
it's injury dependent.
Anything can happen. Alabama is 3-0 at home against SEC competition. All of those SEC opponents were ranked. So Alabama's beaten 3 SEC teams, quote, better than Auburn already at Bryant-Denny this year. They just have to make sure that Auburn's the 4th.
I hear you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we haven't had to come off a loss like this. We hadn't had to come off a loss like this. And God, Jimmy, I'll tell you something. I'll always remember. There's no reason to remember this. I'll always remember the 2000 Southern Miss game in Birmingham because Alabama lost 21-0. I can't remember some Iron Bowl scores, but I can remember losing to Southern Miss 21-0 in a year when we went 3-8, and Arvin Richard threw in some halfback pass that was intercepted, and I think maybe even returned for a 6 or something. But my point is that was my lowest Alabama moment. I've had some low moments, but the Iron Bowl always hurt, but I always knew we were going to get Auburn's best. So
that was like the lowest moment of the worst Alabama team of our time. Of mine and your time, that was the worst Alabama team. And that was the lowest moment. That was the lowest moment of that team. How about this analogy, though, to current Alabama? That game that Alabama lost 21-0 to Southern Miss.
Yeah.
Who was Southern Miss's quarterback?
It wasn't Brett Favre because he was in the early 90s.
It was Jeff Kelly.
Jeff Kelly at Saraland.
Ryan Williams, high school football coach.
Yeah, that's right. I do remember that now. I remember it because you told me. All right. Let me tell you about Gametime. Let me find this little overlay. Look, I don't even look at the Gametime stuff anymore because I've used the app so much. And I know you want to go see basketball now. Everybody wants – look, if you want to go to the Iron Bowl this weekend, kudos. I'm for you. I want Alabama to have a huge contingent there. I may be there with my, 82 children, and that's great. And we can probably fill up the lower bowl. But I want all of you to go, and I want everybody to have a positive – I know we're being negative now. I'm going to be positive towards the end of the week. And take a positive attitude and go to Gametime and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off that first order. But really, I know a lot of people want to go check out basketball, big-time basketball for Alabama this week. If you're in Vegas and you're like, forgot to get my tickets, go to Gametime. get those tickets for Alabama, Houston, Alabama, Rutgers, all that stuff. You want to go see this team play. Gametime wants to help you out, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off that first purchase. The app is so easy to use. You have to go do it. Go to Gametime, download that app, use code LOCKEDONCollege, $20 off that first purchase. I've used it for everything. I'm not lying to y'all. So take my word for it. Go get Gametime now. I think one thing a lot of people are very interested in outside of like player reaction and hearing from DeBoer where do you go from here? And he's not going to necessarily tell us his game plan. Honest to God, I was thinking we need like a team of therapists to talk to this team this week. I mean, I need at least 2 to talk to me this week. But
at least 2.
We're also very interested in recruits' reactions. And on Bama Online, y'all reached out to just about every recruit. And listen, to a man, everybody seems to be, status quo, still going to Bama. They had a bad night. We can live with it. And what we tend to forget is that outside of Georgia and Ohio State, most everybody has something like this go wrong. And their recruits have to react to it, and they're like, hey, yeah, Auburn's recruiting gangbusters, and they have to every week. They're like, yeah, you lost again. How are you holding up? And they're like, we're sticking with Auburn. If they believe in the coaching staff, this loss won't dampen the spirits. It may change the roster in terms of who transfers or something like that. It might, but I think overall the recruit reaction has been positive. Jimmy.
Yeah. Look. I mean, I'll be as blunt as I can, because what I'm talking about here is not a specific player. And also what I'm talking about here is just my general feelings about recruiting in 2024. If Alabama loses someone that's currently committed to them that we believe is going to sign with Alabama in just 9 days from when you're watching the show, 9 days is National Signing Day. If Alabama loses someone, it will have nothing to do with the loss at Oklahoma. 0. It will probably have everything to do with NIL. That's just recruiting 2024. That's what I'll believe. That's my default. And I said this 3 years ago and then have repeated it 100 times since on the show. Look, when something weird happens roster-wise, when something weird happens in recruiting that like leaves you scratching your head, or something happens with the portal and you scratch your head, you're like, how can anyone explain this? The answer is NIL almost every single time. And that's probably what the answer. But no kid that's committed to Alabama is going to not sign with Alabama because of what happened at Oklahoma or the Vanderbilt loss. They're going to sign because they've decided to take more money from somewhere else. I mean, I'm just being blunt and being honest about my general feelings. I'm talking about a specific kid because I don't know. And specific kids can have different stories. That does happen. That's not the only factor for a lot of kids. Caleb Cunningham, I give you a good example of a kid. I think he's probably getting more money from Ole Miss than he was from Alabama, but I also think a lot of that is depth chart, being the man when you step on campus instead of being secondary to Ryan Williams, and being closer to home. I think all of those things factored in. Wasn't just NIL, but that's a factor.
Let's also say this really quickly, because this is a Ryan Williams podcast.
Sure.
The 2 touchdowns he had were absolutely unbelievable. Now, he was out of bounds on the one, but it was this close, and to make the move afterwards to get by those dudes is mind-blowing. And then the catch he made with the body control, that's why it's so awful that call was made. It was, frankly, just unreal. It was crazy. Ryan Williams still deserves his flowers. He did drop a ball or 2 the other night. I'm not excusing him from those, but
he won't be on stock down. It's because of that drop. I'm not going to put him on. I got stock up, stock down to do this week. Finding a stock up guys are going to be very, very hard to do. That's going to be hard to do. But Ryan, you would think, well, it'll be Ryan because he scored twice. They got called back. Is Ryan stock up? I'm going to say no. Why? The drop. That you can't do that. You can't do that at this level. You can't have a ball hit you in both hands and it go right. You can't do it. And he was out of bounds. He did step out of bounds. So no stock up for Ryan. I'm not sure what direction we're going with stock up. Stock down, it's going to be a little busy, a little crowded. It'll be crowded at the end.
The only way you can do a stock up is if it's opposite day. It's the only way.
Graham Nicholson made his only field goal attempt, right? He also maybe him. He also kicked off. And no one's explained that to us. Yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, he kicked. Connor Talty's been kicking off. Talty's been kicking off. Why did all of a sudden Graham Nicholson kick off? And by the way, it was short when the kick that he kicked to open the game anyway, and the kick after the field goal. They were short, which is why Talty had been the regular kickoff guy. But anyway, maybe Graham Nicholson. I also didn't recall Zabian Brown making a bad play on defense. That's because Oklahoma didn't throw the ball. They didn't throw it outside the numbers. I don't think they targeted Zabian's guy because they just weren't. When they threw it, they threw short passes in the middle of the field or perimeter throws, but they didn't really attack the Alabama corners. Damani made at least one bad play.
He missed the sack.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh,
maybe,
okay.
Yeah. He made one bad play, but Zabian didn't do anything. Maybe I might. Do you get stock up because you didn't do anything terrible, but I can't point to anything you did that was good?
I mean, and also, it's like we could have put the ghost of Chris Capps at cornerback, and he would have looked like a lockdown corner.
That's right. They didn't have to. Yeah, they didn't. They didn't have to. They didn't want.
Chris Capps is dead, by the way.
They didn't want to. They didn't have to attack the corners, but the corners didn't give up much because they just weren't attacked. Gosh, stock up. I'm just not. Oh, stock up. The treasurer at Alabama, who has been racking up the goalpost field storming dollars. I mean, we're getting some free money here. I think we're up to at least 300,000, and I think it's more.
There's got to be more, right?
I think it's 100,000 is the minimum you get for field storming. So, hey, so the Alabama comptroller. I mean, who gets this money? I don't know.
I don't know, man.
You're the business guy.
Yeah, I'm not even good at that. I'm not good at anything. I've been rethinking my entire life. Like I told you about my Auburn friends, I've been reevaluating, and I'll tell you what's awful. The more I reevaluate, the sadder I am. I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to stop this podcast. All right, so that's going to do it for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more, and until then, roll tide, everybody.
Roll tide.